Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we take those super long, sometimes boring corporate filings and turn them into something you can actually understand. Today we're diving into a report from UGI Corporation, ticker symbol UGI. It involves something called senior notes and indentures. Don't worry if that sounds like legal mumbo jumbo, we'll break it all down. Let's just say UGI is making some moves with its debt that could affect its future, so let's get to it. Tyler, before we start, if you appreciate getting straight insights from corporate documents, make sure you're subscribed. We also have a Discord community linked in the description below where you can chat about this and other companies we cover. This report is called a Form 8K, which companies file to announce big news that could be important to investors. This particular one is dated May 30, 2025, so it's fairly recent. The most important part of this filing is about a big agreement UGI made. It's all about debt, specifically something called senior notes. Think of senior notes like fancy IOUs that companies sell to raise money. They didn't issue these notes directly. Instead, two of their subsidiary companies, UGI Partners and Refinancing Corp, did. These subsidiaries are like smaller companies under the bigger UG umbrella. Together they are called the issuers. They issued $550 million of something called 950s notes, meaning they have to pay almost 10% per year on that debt. These notes were issued under an agreement called an indenture dated May 30, 2025 between the issuers and US Bank Trust Company. National Association, who acts as the trustee, these 2030 notes will pay cash interest twice a year, in June and December. Now let's talk about some of the fine print. There are rules about when UGI can pay off these notes early. Before June of 27, they can redeem them, which means pay them off, but they have to pay a fee, what they call a make-whole premium. After June 1, 2027, they can still redeem them, but the fee or call premium changes depending on the year they pay them off, declining from 4.75% and from 4.75% to ever IBM off, declining from 4.750% to 0.0%. Also, before June of 27, they can redeem up to 40% of the notes if they use money from selling more stock in UGI Partners or its parent companies, including UGI. In that case, they pay a slightly higher price of 109.5% of the principal amount. There's also a rule about what happens if there's a change of control triggering event. That's a legal term for a big change in who controls the company. If that happens, the issuers might have to buy back the notes at a slightly higher price. It's important to understand where these notes stand in line to get paid back. These 2030 notes are senior unsecured, meaning they are higher up in the payment line than some other debts, but not backed by any specific assets. They are effectively junior to any secured debts and structurally subordinated to debts of the issuer's subsidiaries, including the operating partnership. These notes come with strings attached. The agreement limits what UGI Partners can do. For example, it restricts how much more debt they can take on, what kind of deals they can make with other companies, and whether they can merge with or sell their assets to other companies. These restrictions are in place to protect the people who bought the notes. If you want to read all the nitty-gritty details, you can find the full agreement called the 2030 Notes Indenture attached to this report as Exhibit 4.1. So what did UGI do with the money they raised from selling these notes? They used it to pay off other debts, specifically their 5.875% senior notes due in 26. This is like taking out a new loan to pay off an old one. Speaking of paying off old debt, that's what this section is about. UGI bought back a bunch of their 2026 notes that were offered to be sold back to the company. Then they told the bank that handles those notes, USBTC, to send out a notice that they were going to pay off all the remaining 2026 notes soon. Those 2026 notes will be paid off on June 2025 at a price that includes a little extra called the applicable premium, plus any unpaid interest. On May 30, 2025, UGI put over $114 million into a trust account to make sure they had enough money to pay off those remaining 2026 notes. Once that money was deposited, the agreement for those 2026 notes was considered satisfied and discharged, meaning UGI was mostly done with it. This part just reminds us that everything we talked about earlier about the new 2030 notes counts as a direct financial obligation, which is a fancy way of saying it's a debt they owe. Finally, this section lists the exhibits attached to the report, including the full agreement for the 2030 notes. Now let's step back and look at what this all means for UGI. On the surface, it looks like UGI is just refinancing debt, taking out new loans to pay off old ones. However, A closer look reveals some important nuances. The new notes have a higher interest rate than the old ones, 9.5% versus 5.875%. This means UGI will be paying more in interest expenses going forward. While pushing the maturity date further into the future can provide some breathing room, it also means UGI is locked into these higher interest payments for a longer period. One potential strength is that the new notes have a higher interest rate than the old ones, 9.55% versus 5.875%. This means UGI will be paying more in interest expenses going forward, while pushing the maturity date further into the future can provide some breathing room. It also means UGI is locked into these higher interest payments for a longer period. One potential strength is that the new notes have more flexible redemption terms. This could give UGI more options to manage its debt in the future. However, the restrictive covenants in the agreement could limit. Alright, that's our breakdown of UGI's latest debt shuffle. What's your take on these moves and what they signal for the company's future? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps, and subscribe for more deep dives. Don't forget to check out the Discord in the description. Thanks for watching. See you next time.